Hi, and welcome to another episode of eComOne. And today's guest is Phoebe Skinner, who is actually the project coordinator here at eComOne and SEO Traffic Lab. How you doing, Phoebe?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you.
Now, I've been sort of coaxing Phoebe onto the podcast for the last few months, and here we are. We've finally got Phoebe on. Now, Phoebe's been with us at the agency for a long, long time, and is a real big part of our agency here at eComOne and SEO Traffic Lab. So I think it'd be good for you to kick off, Phoebe, and just give us a little bit of an intro into your background and how we got to, from your start in the industry to today almost. Yeah,
so I started with the agency 6 years ago. I started as an apprentice. I wasn't really that keen on college, so I decided to see what else was out there. And then I've worked on several projects since then, and now I'm the project coordinator. So I work with the SEO team on the day-to-day tasks, and also help with the management of all the different projects.
Great. So started as an apprentice, did that apprentice program. I think a lot of people listening, that are starting in their careers, there's that choice, isn't there? You've got university or college, then university, then you've got an apprentice. I think more and more people now are doing apprenticeships, and I think it's been fantastic to see your progression in the industry. I think Phoebe is very what's the word? What's the word I'm looking for? She looks after a lot of things within our industry, within our agency. So literally hundreds of different projects over the years that Phoebe's project managed with the wider team. So she's fantastic. So okay, I think obviously a lot of things you've done over the last sort of 6 years. You've almost been with the agency and in the industry from school. What would you say has been the biggest life-changing sort of moment within that period?
I think for me, it's just been the opportunity to grow. So obviously starting as an apprentice and now being a project coordinator, I've had the opportunity to work on so many different projects. And I started from just basically doing the basics of writing meta and blogs. And now I'm like a lot more into it, and I'm writing like bigger blogs, and I'm also looking at the local SEO side, which is something that I really enjoy. And also I think like just the project management side, like it's something that I really enjoy doing, and I'm really glad that I got into that role in the most recent years. But also on a more personal level as well, obviously with the growth that I've had, it's also allowed me to buy my own house, which obviously I wouldn't have been able to do if I'd not had the growth of being at the company. So it's been really good.
Yeah, I mean, literally from stepping into the industry, and one of the first tasks that a lot of people do in our agency, and I think in a lot of agencies, is obviously to understand those fundamentals, and some of those fundamentals. Then it's almost like earning your stripes in an agency, in an SEO agency particularly, where we sort of most of our people that come into our agencies, it's sort of like it's like the wax on, wax off of the Karate Kid, doing a lot of tasks, and then earning the stripes, and then going on to other tasks, which take that as you will. But I think maybe writing 10,000 meta, and then that's years ago now, and then now project managing very large projects for companies that have hundreds of locations. And I think obviously you talked about quite a few things there. I think local SEO is a huge area. As I know, it's a huge area for businesses as a whole, specifically now while we're all locked down more, and we're trying to support that local environment and the local traders and local businesses. But I think just to maybe go back a step, what is the difference between local SEO and national SEO for those that are listening? Because we've got a lot of e-commerce stores that will sell nationally, but what's the difference between sort of local SEO and national SEO?
So I think like the methods behind them both are quite similar, but with local SEO, you're trying to target a more like smaller location and like a more specific location, whereas with national SEO, obviously it's a lot more broader. So an example really is like a family-run florist, for example, is going to be wanting to target a much smaller specific audience, whereas a multi-millionaire business selling computer components are obviously going to be trying to go a lot more broader.
On a national level, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously a lot of it is very similar. So it's still very important to make sure that you do keyword research. So you can find those primary keywords and secondary keywords. But at the same time, obviously it varies on which keywords you're going to go down. So for example, with local SEO, you're going to go for keywords that have got more of your like location in. So for example, if you was a florist in Manchester, you'd be looking at keywords like florist in Manchester. Whereas obviously the more national ones are going to be a lot more broader and have like higher volumes.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of things to think about there. So the e-commerce stores listening into the eComOne podcast, which we assume, and we're pretty confident that 99% of them are, the clues in the name, eComOne. They'll be maybe asking, well, I don't sell that much locally. You know, it's all national. You know, why do I need to be worried about local SEO? You know, why should e-commerce businesses want to rank for local terms instead of going after these bigger terms? I think would be a good question.
I think, sorry, I think like if you've got a physical store, then you're still going to want to be ranking for those local terms, because obviously you're trying to get people to come into your store.
Yeah.
So with the national keywords, obviously you're going to be more likely to engage people to have a look online. Whereas if you've got that physical store, then you're going to like increase your visits physically by doing the local SEO side. So ranking for those local keywords.
Okay. So as an e-commerce store, we've got those national, those bigger head terms that are, you know, like the holy grail almost, and where we want to get to. But let's not forget the fact that there is this element of local, you know, specifically if you've got a store and a national, which I know some of you guys listening in will have both. You'll have, you know, a lot of our clients and a lot of our listeners have retail stores or the ability to pick up from a warehouse location, you know, which some of you may not want as much of. But the reality is, I think what we're saying is that obviously more and more people are buying local, you know, if they can, and trying to support that local environment. And that's where you're getting that local inquiry. So when somebody types in that locality, that I think the example you gave was florist in Manchester. If you're a florist in Manchester and you're listening to this, you may well sell £1 million worth of flowers through your e-com store, but you may well also do 100 grand locally or whatever it may be, you know, and getting a piece of that pie at the same time. So, you know, it's something that, you know, you don't want to miss, you know, so it all starts to add up. Now, when we say local SEO, you know, I think, you know, we'll start talking about location and Manchester and, you know, all the different, you know, that locality. So wherever you are listening, you know, or wherever you want to rank locally and you can service locally, you know, you want to look at a strategy for that location is what we're saying. But where would somebody start? You know, I've got an e-com store, you know, I've done a bit of local SEO, maybe got a Google My Business page or something like that. But where's the best place to start for the guys that are listening to the podcast right now?
So I think with a local SEO strategy, there's a few things that you need to consider, like right at the start. So having a look at what your competitors are doing is obviously a really good way to start it, because that's where local SEO can help, because really you want to be outranking your competitors. So if you've got multiple, I'm going to go back to florists. If you've got multiple florists in a location, then obviously you've got a lot of competition. So making sure you're having a look at what your competitors are ranking for, seeing what local keywords they're ranking for, is obviously really important. And also then once you've decided on those keywords, you then need to make sure that they're all over your website, so within your content, on your meta, and then obviously that's going to give you more of an opportunity to rank. Also, a really important thing is making sure that your Google My Business page is fully optimized. So making sure that you've got the correct name, address, phone number, making sure your opening hours are on there, but also making sure you're taking advantage of the different services and features that are on Google My Business. So for example, you can add products on there, you can add the different services that you offer. And then the final one that I'd say is really important, it comes a lot further down the line, but making sure that you're doing local PR. So engaging and establishing relationships with like local newspapers And then when you've got something big to announce, so maybe you've done recruitment or you've got a new product launch, then obviously you can send those to these newspapers, and it's going to get you out there, which is really helping your brand awareness.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of quite a few things there. And I think they're fantastic. Thank you, Phoebe. I think that local PR element, I think a lot of people probably misunderstand or misjudge how potentially not as difficult as they think it might be to reach out to these local news outlets. So wherever you are in the world, in your town and city, there's going to be several, depending on the size of your town, probably dozens and dozens of known news outlets, whether that's the local, the local newspaper, believe it or not, they're still out there, or whether it's the local online, the online equivalent. Every city has one pretty much. I know where we are, there's a couple of options for that local, and building relationships as a business owner with them, because these guys need news. They need news, and there's nothing better. That's a broad statement, but it's not far away. I think there's nothing better than having an on-topic, up-to-date piece of news about your business being put in those news outlets. And Google, will see those they'll know that those local news outlets are authoritative, localized news. So it's a high, usually, 9 times out of 10, a high authority or high-ish authority piece that, and can be quite straightforward. In our instance, we've built relationships with our locality, but then different towns and cities where our clients are based. We've built out a bank of PR contacts, editors that we contact when we have a client that's based in, Manchester, for example. We've got a collection of different people in the industry and different industries. So whether you're in retail, whether you're in, the different areas, different sectors, and as we know, the people that listen to this podcast, we've got people that sell everything. It's amazing. I mean, it really is. I think I just had a call this morning with one of our clients that sells fish. That's ridiculously, doing ridiculously well. And then just about to have a call after this podcast with somebody that sells golf course hole makers. And wherever they are, they have a locality. Wherever they are, so a couple of relationships locally can really, help your local SEO. So we've touched on there a few things. Now, Google My Business, well, I think we should come back to that. So what's the importance of having a Google My Business page for a business?
So it's really important to have a Google My Business page, because when someone searches for your company, that's the first thing that's going to appear. So obviously, if your customer is only wanting to know your address or your opening hours, then they can see that via your Google My Business page without even having to go onto your website. So it's really important to make sure that it's fully optimized. And also you need to make sure that the information is correct, because obviously if someone sees on your Google My Business that you're open till 5 o'clock, but really you're actually open till 3, then they're going to be very disappointed if they turn up to your store.
Yeah.
So especially with what's going on at the minute, it's really important to make sure that your opening hours are correct, because obviously I know a lot of shops and a lot of places have had to do restrictions on their hours.
Yeah.
So it is very important. And then also over like the last couple of years, obviously voice search has become very, very big. So what Google does is, if you were to search for florist near me, for example, it would utilize from your Google My Business page. So that's where it's getting the information from. So if your listing is incorrect, then the voice search result is also going to be incorrect.
Yeah.
So it's just not helping that customer relationship if it's not got the right information.
Yeah, I mean, a voice search, could do a whole podcast on that, but I think the reality is, I listen to, I've got two teenage sons, as you know, and literally they just sit there like that all day, every day. So, Google search, Google, it's a whole new world sort of thing. But I don't do that, and I should do that really, because it's quicker. But that's just, I'm used to typing in, and that's where I am with it. But I know that sort of that generation and a few generations before mine, well, a few years before mine, that's quite a natural. So that, the benefit of voice search, and you making sure that Google My Business is set up properly. So what are some of the things specifically then with a Google My Business page that an e-commerce store can optimize?
So obviously we've already touched on how important the opening hours are,
Yeah.
but also on Google My Business, you have the opportunity to add seasonal hours.
Yeah.
So if, for example, over Christmas or Easter, you've got reduced hours or you're completely closed, then underneath the opening hours section, there's a section to put in seasonal hours. So obviously this is really handy if you've got different hours over the periods. But also a massive thing is making sure that you're taking advantage of the extra features. So for example, you can add products on there. So if you've got like a set of products that sell really well, for example, then you can add pictures and descriptions of them on your Google My Business page. And then it's allowing potential customers to see them before they even get to your website. So they're knowing what to expect once they get onto your site.
Yeah.
And then something that Google have recently added is if you've got a cafe within your store, then you can now add menus to your Google My Business page. So you can add it as a PDF or you can add it as an image. And then obviously that's just helping the customers before they've even arrived.
Yeah.
So I think the most important thing to do is making sure that when you set up your Google My Business, you make sure every single thing is complete. When you go to the main home screen, it's actually got a percentage score. So if you're missing anything, then it will tell you what you're missing. And that's like the key areas that you need to make sure you've got on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing that we've seen with clients is sometimes when we manage their Google My Business pages, they don't have many images. So it's really important to have images on there because obviously people could use them for directions, or they could just use them to be nosy really and see what it is that you're selling.
Yeah.
So it's really important to have like the logo and then also the additional images that you can add.
Yeah, I think that's a great, and it's quite straightforward, there. So I think you guys that are listening in, I think a simple thing for you to go and do is maybe hit pause now, well, in a minute, and go to Google and type in your brand name. So whatever your business is called, type that in, and your Google My Business page will appear on the right-hand side, typically 99 times out of 100. Right-hand side, and you'll see what your business looks like. Now, that image that you're staring at right now, does that reflect your brand as you want it? Is it a logo you created 6 years ago? Is it the old shop front? Or is it, if you're, obviously a lot of you won't have shops, we understand that. But is it the old logo? Is it the old warehouse? Is it the old team? Teams change, the team picture, our team is growing. For example, I look at our team page and it's not always, but it's I looked at it the other day. It's like, oh, okay, we've got 4 more people since we added that photo, so we need to get some new ones done, but it's a bit tricky at the moment, so we'll have to some magical Photoshop maybe soon, but probably not. But when we're allowed to go back in the office properly, we'll have to have a new one, but that could be a while. But yeah, so have a look at how you look now, but then you've got those interior shots, you've got those exterior shots, you've got the product shots, you've got the people shots, and other so just making sure they're fully optimized, and fully complete. There's ways that you name those images as well. So quite a few things there, but what would you say if I was to push you on a couple of sort of hidden gems, a couple of real sort of things that, some things there I think that you've gone through that the guys listening will be able to go through, and put some time into, but what are some things where, really going to sort of turn the dial on that local SEO?
I think the most important thing to do, and like my biggest piece of advice, is just keeping up to date as well. So making sure that you're always looking out for new updates and new features that have been added. Going back to Google My Business in particular, they're always adding new stuff. So for example, due to the pandemic, they've released a feature now where you can add a service that will say that it's mandatory to wear a mask within your store, or it will say that you've got that you're going to clean down the sides, for example. So it's making customers feel like they can still come to you and that they are going to be protected. Another thing that they've added because of the pandemic is if you're now offering a delivery service or a pickup service and you've got particular hours for that, then you can now add these hours on as well.
Yeah.
So if you're not able to open, but people can come and pick stuff up from you, then you can add specific hours so they're aware of like the sort of times that they can go. So yeah, I'd say my biggest piece of advice is just making sure you're always keeping up to date, having a look at the news stories, making sure you're keeping up to date with like Google, and then you're going to find out everything and make sure you're implementing it straight away. So as soon as new stuff comes out on Google My Business, straight away we're sat and we're trying to work out where that's going to work for our clients. So we can make sure that they've got all of the up-to-date services as well.
So keeping things up to date, I think it's key to a lot of digital marketing, isn't it? It's all right. People say, "Oh, I can do SEO. I can do SEO. We can do this. We can do." But things are changing. Things are changing. If you're not keeping up to date, yeah, you'll be doing okay, but you can be doing a lot better than that by keeping things up to date. And just keeping an eye on the changes. I know we blog quite a lot on both of our sites around local SEO. So I recommend having a look there as well, guys. Obviously seen a lot of changes over the last year with specifically about the COVID changes and the changes to Google My Business around COVID and the things that you can do. Working on a lot of interesting projects, as I know. But obviously you've worked on a lot. I mean, we're talking, I know hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, 500-ish different local My Business projects. What would you say has been the most interesting project, and what are some of the elements of that project that some of the listeners might get some benefit from?
So I'd say the most interesting project that I've worked on and that we're still currently working on is a client who's got 220 locations. So they're all in different sectors, but basically they came to us around 2 years ago and asked us if we would be able to manage and optimize all of their Google My Business listings. So 220 different listings. So obviously at the start it was quite a daunting process, having that many to optimize, but I think it was so interesting to see how many things were like missing from the listings. So it gave us a massive opportunity to add so many new things to them.
Yeah.
And then from that, we've also started optimizing their website. So there are different locations on their website. So we've done the keyword research, which has been very much local SEO keyword research, and also looking at their content and seeing how we can optimize that. I think the main thing that I took away from that project was like the management side. So we set up a Trello board, which is a project management software. And we basically listed out all of the tasks that we would be doing with the relevant deadlines. And then from that, we've known exactly what we need to do, when it's got to be done by. And then we've been able to have really tight communication with the client, and managed to build such a good relationship. And now I'd say it's definitely my favourite project to work on.
So 220 plus locations, 7 different sectors. And obviously a tight relationship with the client. Obviously learned an awful lot from that project. And how long have you been working with them now?
I think it's been nearly around 2 years.
Yeah.
So, and obviously it's always been like new tasks each time as well. Like each time we have meetings, there's always new things that we can take away. Obviously when the pandemic started, there was a lot of work that we needed to do. So a lot of the stores were like restricted hours, or some of them had to close. So we've had to do a lot of work on their Google My Business to make sure that it's like exactly the same as their website.
I know from the inside track, I know for the guys that's listening in, I mean, the sheer volume of activity there, if you imagine owning 220 stores, and then Boris says to you, right, you've now got to do X, Y, Z, or the reality is you're having challenges with your staffing and stocking of your stores. So it's no longer necessary for you to be, or you can't be open till 10 o'clock. You've now got to go in and change 220 stores, or even if it's 50 or 2 or 20 or 20, you guys listening, we've got a lot of other clients with multiple stores, whether it's 2, 10, 20, 50. You've got to go in and adjust you know, all those opening hours, all those COVID restrictions and COVID services that it's a big task. But when Google's deciding who to rank and who is the expert out there, because ultimately that's what it's about, you know, is how you're going to outrank your competitors, you know, when we're looking at it and drive traffic from real searchers. If you're the company that's active and consistent in your Google My Business, it's a big, you know, it's a big tick. It's not the only tick, of course, in the SEO matrix, but it's you know, on a local level, it's a huge one. That Google My Business, that local, you know. So there's a lot of things there, Phoebe. We've got the Google My Business, big focus there. I would suggest that, you know, I would say to the guys that are listening, I think it would be an area that a lot of people with e-commerce stores will have overlooked, and we've sort of maybe not done a lot of this stuff. And there's a lot of things there that I think, you know, you should implement if you're listening. You know, Google My Business, you know, you're just going to Google, you know, /business. There's your Google My Business page. If you can't log in as a business owner, again, you need to sort that out. That's usually the first thing we find. I know when we take on clients, right, can we organize the access? Or how do I do that? Okay, maybe they don't know the access bit and the user access, but to actually access their account, you know, quite often it's something that they might not have claimed in the first place, or something that, you know, an old employee that might not be with the company anymore created or claimed and then managed, and now they can't get access to it. So it's going through that process, claiming it if you haven't, which most of you I think will have done, but then going through and having a look at your own, you know, look and feel. You know, I think personally, you know, I take, from my point of view, you know, we've had our agency for 11 years, in my previous business for 10 years. So 2 businesses really, or 2 parts of my life really that I've had businesses. And, you know, it's important to me, very important to me, what, you know, when somebody looks at our brands, because we've got 2 brands now, eComOne and SEO Traffic Lab, what we look like online, you know, and our reputation is important to me. And the way we look, the way we feel, you know, from an outside looking in. So when you go to Google, type in your brand, it's got the old logo, that's not good enough. It's just not good enough. You know, if you've got, you know, pictures from 1988 or whatever, when you know, I'm saying that there's an argument for that story of, you know, from where you were to, you know, showing that process and progress within your business. But does it represent you as it should? What do your reviews look like on your Google My Business? And that's another area of Google My Business. So, you know, I think there's some good takeaways there to implement. So obviously managing so many projects, what advice would you give to the guys? Because I think as an e-commerce store owner, they're managing so many things, whether it is that bit of the Google My Business and the, you know, so many things there. You know, I know from obviously working with you that, you know, project managing, you know, it's quite a task in itself. You know, we'll see how many of our team listen to this episode, because I know within our team we've got some extremely organized people and shall I say some not so organized people in the team that are working on that, and that's great. You know, they're working on it and they keep working towards it. But, you know, being organized and organizing, you know, what might be, in your instance, several hundred actions a month, if not, you know, 300, 400, 500 things a month, you know, and juggling all that. What would you say are some things that could help the listeners to help project manage projects and project manage their business? You know, what sort of insight would you give us there?
I would highly recommend that you get a project management software. So last year we made the move from Trello to Asana, and I absolutely love Asana. It's so good for like keeping everything in one place. So basically for each of our clients, we have a project, and then in that project, you've got it all broken down into different months with each task, and it just looks so clean and like it's so easy to navigate. Also, one of the features that I really like is you can set it to whether it needs to be completed, whether it's being worked on, or whether it's been done. So obviously when you're, as a project coordinator, when I go in and have a look, I can obviously compare that to the deadline, and then I know whether I need to chase anybody on it. So I'd say it's definitely a good idea to make sure you've got a project
Who are you
management
chasing
software.
the most? No, I'm joking. No, we won't go there.
But also with Asana, you can like connect it with different apps. So we use Slack for like our communication in the company. So we can connect Asana with Slack. So, for example, if you complete a task on Asana, it will then show in a Slack chat for that specific client. So obviously then it's just allowing the whole team to be up to date, and like the whole team knows exactly what's going on. So it's a really good way of making sure everything's in one place and the communication's still like going within the company.
I think that will resonate with a lot of listeners. People are trying to scale ultimately their business, and if we forget e-commerce products for a minute, it doesn't matter what you sell, what you're trying to do in your business, you've got to get organized, and having frameworks, processes, systems, these are words that are thrown around every day, but having something that's almost like the hub of the project management, and we've tested a lot of different things, and a lot of different people in the business have come through the business and the outlet business, and we've changed a few things around, and the different project management systems we tried, but we're set on Asana and Slack, which work well together. I think that there's two things there I'd recommend to check out. Obviously it does depend a little bit on your own business, but when you think about the different projects you will have on as an e-commerce store owner, from your HR piece, your importing piece, your marketing piece, your sales piece, your whether it's your Google Shopping, AdWords, Facebook piece, all the different elements, where are you going to manage those projects and who's going to be assigned them, and then really keep people accountable. Deadlines move and things change, and but we're just regrouping on that quite regularly. I know as a team, we've got different sort of sub teams in our business, and Phoebe has a sort of two sort of teams, if you like, on the SEO side. And they have sort of near enough, they have bigger monthly meetings, but then weekly meetings. But everything really, especially when we're working from home, we're getting pinged from the different tools. It's like, oh, that's deadline's due. Not too much, but enough. So just having those systems, there's obviously free trials for those. Slack's quite an interesting one because it's just been bought out by, oh God, the name escapes me now. Big CRM, Salesforce, about a month ago, I think. So it'll be interesting. They just started doing TV. I noticed TV ads for Slack in the UK here last week. So now they've got this big investment. I think it's $1 billion. Oh no, it's more than that. It's several billion it was sold for. So, it's going to be an interesting journey, I think, with Slack, the things that they'll implement, and the integrations they'll implement. I'm pretty sure that it'll integrate with other systems that you guys may be using. And that's the beauty of it as well. We implement it. We integrate it with a few other systems as well. So, for example, here's one for you guys. So, I think a lot of the guys that are listening to the podcast will be doing AdWords or shopping. If you're not, you know what you need to do. You need to have a look below and book a meeting with one of the team. But when you're running Google Shopping ads, for example, you may well have issues with your feed. And you'll get a notification in your merchant center to say, oh, a 20% decrease in your product data, in your SKUs, or there's an issue with this, there's an issue with VAT, there's an issue with delivery, and it might be going into an inbox with a lot of other email, and that will then get missed. And then the next thing your feed's down, and you can't then run ads. Your ads are down. Oh, my ads are down. Oh, I had a notification 3 weeks ago. What you can do, quite straightforward, is create a channel in Slack, which is what we do. Create a channel in Slack, and when we get any notifications from any of our client accounts, it gets pushed into that Slack channel. And then the team here at eComOne that are responsible for feeds, they are in that channel, as are the head of department, as am I, because that's a high priority. And then it doesn't get missed, and then it's like, right, that's a high priority channel. Somebody's got a notification to say their ads are at threat, or there's going to be a problem. So you can use it for other sort of, and then when you start going deeper in, I've taken over on ads now, but when you think about any big shifts in your AdWords accounts, you can set triggers to push into Slack and that type of thing. Right, so Asana and Slack, two big takeaways there as well. So I always like to finish every episode on a book recommendation now, or a training recommendation.
So I would highly recommend the Local Seo Course, which is on SEMrush, and it's with Greg Gifford.
Yeah.
So it's got 10 lessons and it's completely free, but obviously it's giving you all those insights that you need to know for local SEO. And also on LinkedIn, Greg Gifford also posts videos every week with like new updates and stuff as well. So that's definitely worth checking out.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. For the guys that are listening that maybe want to contact you directly, that want to contact you and find out more about what you're doing on the local SEO in the local SEO space, what's the best way to do that?
Just drop me an email. So my email's phoebe@ecomone.com, or you can also find me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. So LinkedIn, I know you're very active on LinkedIn. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Phoebe.
Thank you.
And I'll speak to you later. See you later.
See you later.